Hi, folks. Mr. Hansen here once again. I want to show you guys the next step in creating your CAD model for your CO2 Dragster. The last video we looked at how to make the refinements to our actual physical model. I want to show you guys now how to do the assembly to create a fully assembled design. Once again, we're going to start with the insert menu, and I'm going to use the stock parts that I've already created. So if you use that insert tool, navigate to Foundations of Engineering, open the Assets tab. There is a CO2 Dragster stock parts file for you guys to work from. So again, we just want to grab, I'm just going to grab one copy of the parts that I need. Actually, you know what? Let me grab all of the parts that I need. I already did the stock body. Like I've already done those refinements, so I don't need the stock body, but I do need, the CO2 cartridge. I'm going to grab all of my bushings. I'm going to grab my front wheels, my rear wheels, and let me snag those eye hooks. And of course, I'm not going to forget those axles. So click OK. That's going to place those parts smack dab inside my tutorial demo design file. I'm going to save that real quick. And now we can go through the assembly process to create a fully assembled CO2 Dragster. So because we use derived parts and I didn't design these parts in place, you can see that these parts are not really located where they need to be. Actually, well, it looks like some of them are. It looks like that axle is right where I need to be. So let's start with that. I'm going to go up here to my assemble tool. I'm going to grab the as-built joint, click the axle, click that stock body. Now, that axle will need to rotate inside the stock body, so I'm going to choose a revolute for my type of motion. Let's see. Let me see if I can select the center make connector for that center of rotation. Let me try that again. Grab it a different snap point. Let me try hiding my stock body. There we go. There we go. That's going to be the center point for my revolute. So let me unhide my stock body, and there I've got, pretty simple joint. Now the axle is going to rotate inside the body. All the other parts are going to be rigid joints. So let me once again grab the as-built joint. We're going to have these little bushings in between the wheels and the body of the car. So let me grab my two components, and I'm going to make this a rigid motion because it doesn't necessarily need to move in terms of creating my design. And then let me create one more rigid joint between this wheel and the axle itself. All right, that's rigid. And with that particular motion, now we have two things attached to the axle, and the axle itself can rotate inside the body of the car. Now, looks like with the rear wheel, though, this axle is not where it needs to be. So for my assemble, I will need to use my joint tool, which will let me select make connector points. And move parts so that it aligns those make connector points. Let's see, selecting this one's going to be a little tricky. I'm going to see if I can kind of zoom in on this thing. I want to see the center snap connector point. Let's see if it'll let me snap to it. It looks like the side sketch is getting in my way. That's not the right position. So let me escape and try coming at this from a slightly different perspective. Let me look at the overall length of the car body. It's 1.65 inches. Let me try doing that joint again, clicking J on my keyboard. So I want to mount that middle point. Stop that. I'm going to select that outside. Let me change my offset along this direction. So I want to center that. So I'm going to make that negative 1.65 divided by 2. That's going to be half the width of the vehicle. And that should center that joint smack dab in the middle of the body of the car. Now you notice while I was doing those joints, this car flipped around and it kind of rearranged the orientation of things that I'm trying to assemble. We can prevent like that. That makes it a little bit difficult to figure out what to connect together. We can prevent the main body of the car from doing that simply by clicking that component and using the ground tool and capture position, and that'll keep that main body of the car from moving around. It's always a good idea when you're doing assembly stuff to have your main chassis or main component grounded so it doesn't move around while you do your assembly. All right, let's stick a few more things in here. Let me grab another washer. I'm going to grab my joint tool. I think the rest of these should work pretty well. Get the right orientation for that snap point. There we go. That looks correct. Now, for some reason, it looks like it's backwards, like it's embedded into the body of the car. There's a flip tool you can use to flip around the orientation. You can always try rotating stuff, and like I said, using offsets to get the right alignment between the snap connector points that you've chosen. So it might take a little tweaking depending on what you've selected. Let me go ahead and assemble the other half of this. So let's see, this center hub of the rear wheel, that should mount directly adjacent to the little brass washer. Okay. Yeah, that's got the center of this. Yeah, half of this assembly done. The assembly for the other side, pretty much the exact same thing. I'm going to go ahead and do my assembly for the CO2 cartridge. Stick that in there as well. Now, again, depending on how you've refined your design, you may see like the CO2 cartridge sticking out the back or something weird like that. Like I said, you can use the offset here when you do your joint to change that positioning, to change the alignment of that CO2 canister. In terms of the actual vehicle that you're going to fabricate, if the CO2 canister is embedded inside the vehicle, it's going to be hard for the firing pin to make contact with the CO2 canister. You want to make sure that the little end of the CO2 canister is protruding from the rear of the vehicle at least a little bit. And it doesn't matter if it sticks out quite a bit, as long as we have a secure connection between the CO2 canister and the body of your car. So I'm going to let you guys finish the assembly. Like I said, the assembly for the stuff on the other side is the exact same thing. You can also, if you want to be extra fancy, use the mirror tool to reflect those components that we've already assembled in the correct position. And that'll create, the wheels and bushings already in the correct position and let you use the as-built joints instead of using the joints to position those objects. So that is the steps we need to create our assembly. In the next video, we'll talk about taking our assembly and turning that into detail drawing blueprints that we can use to actually take to the workshop and fabricate an accurate reproduction of your CO2 dragster.